Hi there. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch this webinar. I put together this educational series to help you understand a little bit more in depth about some of the issues you might be experiencing. And so today's topic will be on numbness and tingling in the feet, which is something that people talk to me about a lot. Let me get this started. So I'll go over the signs and symptoms of tingling and numbness, why you shouldn't ignore it, because it might be telling you something bigger that's happening underneath. And then at the end of the presentation, which takes about 20 minutes or so, I'll open it up to questions and answers. So questions that you have after the lecture, I'll answer. And then I've got a couple of extra bonuses on here for those who are attending live. And if you're re-watching this, you're still eligible for some of the bonuses that I provide. So I hope you stay tuned for that. So what are the early signs of neuropathy? Tingling and numbness. So before I get started, I want you to know that this is really for educational purposes, and attending this presentation does not constitute a physician-patient relationship, which means don't make any changes in your healthcare as a result of what you find here without consulting your doctor first. So I thought it would be more interesting to give you a few statements and see if you can discern what's true and what's not true. So 5 statements, and that's the topic for today. So is the first one true or false? Peripheral neuropathy only affects old people. Number 2, peripheral neuropathy is always caused by diabetes. True or false? You can think it, you can type it out in the chat box. Number 3, there's no effective treatment for peripheral neuropathy. Number 4, peripheral neuropathy only causes pain. And number 5, peripheral neuropathy is always permanent. If you thought I was going to answer this right now, you'd be wrong. I will give you the answer at the end of the presentation because this is exactly what I'll be talking about. So let's first go back to what neuropathy is. When you see the word neuro, that means nerve. And then when you see the word opathy, that means some kind of pathology. And in this instance, this is about nerve damage. So nerve damage can cause a variety of things, including changes in the way you feel. And nerves are made up, they're coming from your brain down your spine, extends to your fingertips like a tree. So if you think about your body like a tree trunk and the branches are the end nerves, that's what allows us to communicate with the world about whether something is hot or cold. It allows us to feel the sensory around us, and it's protective. But when the nerve is damaged, you may not be able to feel what's hot. So if your hand is on a hot stove, you don't know to pull back, and that can cause tissue damage if your hand is staying on the stove for too long. Some people report having weird sensations, like it feels like their feet are woody in texture. It doesn't feel right. Oftentimes, people are saying they're presenting with numbness and tingling in their feet, particularly at nighttime when their mind is rested and their body is communicating with them. So that could be an indication of nerve damage. And some people experience pain that's bad enough that keeps them up at night. They can't sleep well, or they need prescription medication. And the end result of nerve damage is not being able to feel at all. And that can bring a lot of problems too. If we can't feel the world around us, especially in our feet, it does cause significant issues. So why do these symptoms matter? It's a warning sign that something else is going on. So your body senses pain or disruption in signal. It means there's something that we need to look into. We shouldn't ignore it, because a late stage of not dealing with the root cause could be irreversible damage. And that's why early intervention is very important, because we can slow down those progression or even stop it if we catch it soon enough. So the end stage of nerve damage is that we don't get this feedback of the world. We don't know our feet are on the ground. So we're going to have balance issues. We're going to have a higher risk of falls. And we may even have tissue damage. We may not know that we stepped on a sharp object, which then gets infected. And that's how people end up with an amputation, especially those who have diabetes that cause their nerve damage. They can't feel, their immune is suppressed, They can't deal with the bacteria that entered their skin. And then all of that leads to a decreased quality of life where they can't be independent. They're always worried about walking. They walk less, affecting their mental health. So that's why understanding this is so important. There are a lot of causes for peripheral neuropathy. The most predominant issues coming in here, at least that I see, stems from diabetes or pre-diabetes. So you actually don't need to have the diagnosis of diabetes to experience nerve problems. I see it in people who are pre-diabetic. And that's excess blood sugars causing vessel damage, which also causes damage to the nerves, to the communication of the nerves, and so on. Some people have what's called idiopathic. We've tested for everything and we still don't know what the cause is. And some people might attribute that to simply aging. But that's not the only reason. That's not the only cause. You can see there are other things here like autoimmune deficiencies, for autoimmune diseases like Sjogren's and lupus, or vitamin deficiencies. And some of these things we can test for. And that's what's really important, that there are tests specific to these things that we need to either rule in or rule out. This slide is really just showing you the differences between large fiber and small fiber. The closer it is to the spine, the larger the fibers are, and those are more protected with the myelin sheath. Whereas the smaller fibers, they don't have that myelin sheath, and they do different functions, like they're responsible for how much you sweat, or they regulate your blood pressure. So the nerves communicate different things within our body about the outside world. What's important about small fiber neuropathy is that we can measure if it's present or not. And let me go into detail about what I mean by that. So if somebody presents with nerve issues, we often send them out to a neurologist who can perform a nerve conduction study or an electromyography. Sometimes these are two tests in one where they're testing for the muscle feedback and as they're stimulating the nerve. And this tells us if there is damage of large fiber. So the large nerve fiber, if it's damaged, would show up in this test. However, it doesn't really test for the small fiber. We have to do a different test for that. So you can still have a normal nerve conduction study and experience these symptoms and have small fiber pathology. And how do we test for that? There's a product called Pseudoscan. This company has created a scan for office use to measure how well your sweat glands are producing. It has an electrochemical signal, and then your body responds by sweating or not sweating. And so there's a measurement with that. The issue with this kind of test is that it is expensive. It is not readily available. It's FDA approved, and it is considered the gold standard. But this company has also done something really cool where they provided a home test option through their scale, which is called Body Pro 2. And I had the opportunity to have this in my office and test it out for myself. And this is not just a scale that measures your weight, but it also does some other body composition measurements. And it also looks at the electrochemical skin conductance. So my ability to sweat, I can use this machine to measure it myself or to monitor it myself. And so this allows us early detection of peripheral neuropathy, specifically for those who have diabetes, because this is a risk factor in developing a diabetic foot ulcer or other foot complications. So this is the scale that you can purchase for yourself, and you can choose to send the data to your doctor who's monitoring certain metrics with you, including measurements of the risk of peripheral neuropathy. So I thought this was amazing to have accessible to the general public. What I really like about this unit is that we can monitor your progress over time. So peripheral neuropathy doesn't happen overnight. You don't just wake up and you have numbness or pain for no reason. It is a slow causing issue or a slow progressing issue. We know that 70% of people who have diabetes will develop peripheral neuropathy, nerve damage, and half of those people will not have symptoms. And this is a crucial indicator for the person who might be at risk of developing a foot ulcer or a foot sore. So if we can catch it early enough, we can prevent those long-term consequences like hospitalization or infection and even amputation. So it is a significant way for us to detect things early and intervene early. It's very much like how we can test breast cancer early through mammography or ultrasound. This is the same thing. We can catch it early enough to do something about it. There are other ways that we can test this small fiber. In the office here, I can do a skin biopsy. I numb you up and take a small skin sample, send it to the pathologist to read, and they can tell us if there's a presence of nerve damage or not of the small fibers. And if we get some information initially, we then provide a treatment, and then we would resample the tissue to see if there is nerve regrowth. That is a quantitative way that we can help people see their progress in their treatment plan. But some people don't like tissue biopsy, so I think the scale can also give us similar information without the invasiveness. We do have to order a lot of labs. If somebody comes in and they say, I have numbness and tingling in my feet, we have to start ruling things in and out. And this is what that list could look like. It's quite extensive, and it's going to be based on the history. So just keep in mind, you're not going to be quizzed on this, but we do have to dig very deep to understand where the root cause is and tackle it there instead of just covering up the symptoms or ignoring it. This was one example of a test that could be performed at home as well, and I thought I would share that with you in case you were curious about your own micronutrient profile. This traditionally conventional test that you get at the doctors is usually limited information. It gives us a broad view of what's going on in your body. If you want more comprehensive overview, a whole blood nutrient test can do that, and this is something that you would order at home, have the kit sent to you, and you would do a finger prick, collect the blood, send it off, and then you can have the doctor go over the results with you. And I've done this for myself. It's quite easy. You have to get your blood flowing, do a little finger prick, collect a little bit of a specimen. The box in the kit comes with the shipping label. You send it back to the lab within 24 hours. And then in a couple of weeks, you'll get some answers as to what your nutrient profile looks like. And then from there, you can choose to change your diet so that it can have a better balance and help tackle if it's a nutritional deficiency causing your neuropathy. A little bit more information about micronutrient testing. I often order this test or recommend this test if the individual has other issues going on because you're still connected to your feet. The foot problems are really a symptom. There are other things that can show up, which tells us we've got to look under the hood. So things like stress and fatigue and depression and other skin issues may clue us in that it might be a nutritional gap somewhere within you that we have to address. And it also can show up as numbness and tingling in your feet too. So I look at you holistically to ensure that we're catching things early, we're treating things early, and making sure that you are aware of your own body markers so that you can stay healthy long term. And if you're wondering why this test is important, traditionally speaking, the standard American diet is heavily insufficient in the important nutrients that help nerves thrive. When we're deficient, we usually end up in a chronic inflammatory state, which causes a lot of damage throughout our body, not just our nerves. And so it's important to be precise about what supplements we're taking, what the deficiencies are, so that we can do the right thing for our overall health. So the treatment goals that I generally have is holistic. I want to look at you from top to bottom, not just your feet, because we know that your feet is not in isolation. When your feet have problems, you will have problems in your day-to-day activities. So I look at you holistically, and I also offer these types of testing to do that. I always aim for the least invasive, start with the easy stuff first before implementing more invasive things. I like using evidence-based practices, things that stem from traditional conventional medicine, but also functional medicine, so that we have a well-rounded approach that is individualized for each person. And it has to be financially sound for the individual to be able to make this investment in their health. At the end of it all, we really want to be able to offer early diagnosis to give better outcomes. Because if we don't, those end up being costly consequences. like amputations that I used to do very often. So again, treatment has to be holistic if we're dealing with peripheral neuropathy. It is a slow progression. And oftentimes the quick treatment are things like making sure you've got good shoes, you've got custom orthotics, we're addressing the external sources. We may also offer things like symptomatic support, massage, acupuncture, physical therapy, laser therapy, prescriptions, and so on. And those are great as a quick treatment. But looking under the hood with additional tests, we really want to treat the root cause so that it doesn't happen again or that it doesn't get worse. So we are looking at those deficiencies. We're looking at sources of inflammation. We're talking more about lifestyle modifications so that these are daily activities that we can do to improve our health rather than waiting for an endpoint where it becomes irreversible. So going back to the beginning of the presentation, I asked you some questions and I wonder if you got any of these right. Let's go through it. Number one, peripheral neuropathy only affects old people. And this is false because you saw that it affects people with all kinds of medical conditions. And I've seen it as young as people in their 30s who drink lots of alcohol and develop liver cirrhosis and they have nutrient deficiencies, and then they end up having irreversible nerve damage. Peripheral neuropathy is always caused by diabetes, and you can see none of these statements I gave you early on are true. We see that it's not just diabetes, there are other conditions that could cause it as well. And so we have to test and make sure we rule those issues out. There are effective treatments for peripheral neuropathy. So treatments include things that help you feel better, help you sleep at night. But we also want to treat the underlying cause with lifestyle changes in diet and exercise. So there's a two-pronged approach in treating peripheral neuropathy, and it's best if we catch it early when it is reversible. Peripheral neuropathy only causes pain. As you saw earlier in the slide, half of the people who have diabetes do not have pain, and they end up with nerve damage. And sometimes it becomes too late when they realize they have nerve damage. So pain is not the only indicator that something is wrong. It could be as subtle as that numbness and tingling that comes and goes until one day you wake up and you have balance issues, or you developed a callus that you didn't know was there, which can then lead to bigger foot problems. And then lastly, as you know now, peripheral neuropathy is not always permanent. If we catch it early, we can reverse it or slow the progression. So some very simple home care tips for you is to do daily foot checks, just making sure you didn't step on something, a callus didn't form, a blister didn't show up, because if it did, give it some TLC, some attention. Always make sure you have shoes that fit all of your toes. The fashion industry likes to jam feet in very tight shoes, and you want to periodically make sure you check your shoe sizes or your foot size from time to time. You're not always a size 8. Just because you were a size 8 in 8th grade doesn't mean you're a size 8 when you're 60. So making sure your shoes always fit can protect those frictions and blisters from developing. Avoiding extreme temperatures, the best way to do this is to take a thermometer and measure the bathtub water if you're going to do a foot soak or if you're going to take a bath. I often get patients who have neuropathy, number one, not know they have neuropathy, and number two, burn themselves because they wanted a nice hot bath because it's soothing, but it was too hot. They couldn't detect that and they gave themselves a third-degree burn. I want to bring up something really interesting about nerve activation. Exercise is great. It increases blood flow. It's good for your mental health, but also the intentional exercise of activating your feelings, the connection that you feel in your feet with your mind is very powerful. It's being aware of your body. So daily sensory activation is something as simple as feeling the ground or feeling textures of the ground. In a world where we wear lots of shoes and socks every day, we're kind of blunting that sensation. And so we do know that people who are aged 70 and older have diminished sensation in their feet. And they believe that that's because of being in socks and shoes all day. We're not activating those nerves. And so if you don't use it, you lose it. When do you seek professional help? If you notice something that's persistent, don't ignore it. We want to test, we don't want to guess, so that you can have an accurate diagnosis and a treatment plan. So prevention and monitoring is the best medicine. So from here, I'm going to close out my screen real quick just so that I can answer some questions and answers. I can't see the chat, so give me 1 second. A question came in here. Is poor circulation also a cause for neuropathy? That's a great question. Yes, poor circulation does lead to neuropathy because your nerves are bathed by blood vessels. And if the blood vessels are not supplying blood to the nerve also dies off. And so, in people with diabetes, for instance, who end up having blood vessel damage, also have neuropathy. So, they go both hand in hand. And that's why sometimes when somebody who has diabetes comes in with a cut on their foot, it doesn't heal as fast. It's because number one, they couldn't feel it, and number two, they didn't have enough blood flow to the area. So that's a really great question. Let me just see if there's any other questions that came up before I move on to the bonus for you all being here. Does insurance cover these testing? What's really important to understand is that insurance there's a variety of coverage, right? So we never really know what they will cover. Typically, they'll cover things like the basic lab that you might get at Quest or LabCorp, for example, but not always. I know vitamin D, for instance, Medicare doesn't pay for that, so it ends up being an out-of-pocket expense. So it's always a good idea to get an estimate of what things are going to cost you with your insurance and without it. Then that way you can be empowered and decide where you want to spend your money. And then there are other tests that are a lot more comprehensive that's not covered by insurance, like the functional micronutrient testing. Those are usually not covered by insurance. So if you want a deeper dive, you do have to pay out of pocket for that. So for being here, and I know I'm wrapping up to 30 minutes of time here. Um, I really wanted to thank you for being here, for watching, whether you're here live or if you're watching the recording, to offer you this holiday bonus. I use FullScript to prescribe a lot of supplements, and I take a lot of supplements from here myself as well. And what I've done is I've automatically given everybody 10% off if you decide to use FullScript as your source for supplements. What's great is that they ship stuff to your house, and if you decide to do an auto refill, you get an additional 5% off to get that auto refill, which is kind of a no-brainer. You don't want to keep thinking about all the things you have to buy. So you ultimately get 15% off if you purchase through my link that I provide here on the QR code, or you can also go to the website, drtpodiatry.com, to find the patient resources for this link here. And you also get free shipping over $50. So it's holiday season. If you want to stock up, this is the perfect way to do that. I was just going to leave it at this, but I actually wanted to give you one more thing to entice you to really be proactive in your care. So I've partnered up with a local chiropractor in town. She has celebrated her 24th year in chiropractic of her business. And so I decided to purchase some gift certificates from her as a gift to you. So if you decide to book a consultation within the next 2 weeks with me, you will also get a free gift certificate to get treatments, 60 minutes of care, chiropractic care with Dr. Krista Healy, which is valued at $150. So if you book the consultation, you show up at the consultation within the next 2 weeks, you get the certificate. So I hope that entices you to be proactive and have control in your health as to these subtle things that might not seem very significant, but can be consequential if we do nothing about it. The worst thing that can happen is that you don't have any issues. But the best thing that can happen is that you have a treatment plan that can slow down the progression of this very serious problem. So I would invite you to call the office for an appointment if you're experiencing numbness and tingling in your feet. If you maybe had some normal nerve testing and you're like, I still don't feel normal, and you want to dive deeper and you're ready to make a change, you can call the office. I will be there to answer your call, or you can leave a voice message, or you can schedule yourself using this QR code and let us know that you're interested in a consultation. And what you'll get with that again is you'll get 15% off on any of the supplements I might recommend. And it doesn't have to be supplements I recommend. If you're already taking it, you can certainly use Fullscript for that too. These are high quality brands. And then you'll also get that free certificate for chiropractic care, which is worth $150. So if you're a new patient or if you're an established patient, this offer will be available to you.